Good morning. Good afternoon. Welcome, everybody. Welcome to Talk. Thank you for making time today. Hopefully, has everybody been getting value out of the new format, the conversations that we're having? Is everybody getting a good feeling about the direction that we're going? That's the question that I want to start off today with. And then we'll start the conversation today is the intake meeting versus the strategic meeting. We have a guest panelist who is going to be joining us. I'll introduce her shortly. But if you would, in the comments, just give me some feedback on the format, the conversations, to make sure that we're continuing to see value. While we're doing that, as usual, I want to walk through to make sure that everybody has seen the tool and understands the process. Someone just yell out if you can see my screen for Talk Talent. Good to go. Love it. Thank you. So this is the homepage. I'm sure everybody's been here before. This is where everything happens in Talk. All of the forums, all of the events that you're attending, all of the polls that you currently have access to are all available here on the page. This is the events page. And one of the things that I like to point out about this page is it's not just the events that are upcoming. It is also any events where we've talked about anything in the past. You can search by a specific topic and then go back through and watch those recordings. Our forums page is where you can come in and ask questions. You can add comments, or you can create a new topic. Very valuable if you have questions or would like to get feedback from your peers on how to do specific things. The polls we use primarily as a way to get a pulse. So what are we doing in the industry? How are we doing it? What are the questions that we should be asking? The members page is the first place that I ask everyone to come when I walk them through their welcome to Talk. If you have not done this already, please source by your current chapter location and add as many people as you feel would be appropriate. I recommend adding them all. It's as simple as clicking their LinkedIn button and then adding them as a connection on LinkedIn. You also have the ability to chat with them here. The other thing I like to point out is you can also source by industry. So for example, if you're in construction and you want to meet other construction people, click the button that says construction and architecture, or you can search it. And then you can also add people here as well. If you would like to invite members, and we ask that you do, anyone that's TA or TA adjacent in your organization, it's as simple as clicking the invite member button and putting in their email address, their first name, and their last name. If there's a large group of people that you would like to invite, please feel free to email me at tim@talktalent.com. So again, that's tim@talktalent.com. Send me a spreadsheet with first name, last name, email address, and we will get them added for you. The vendors page is, as always, it's one of the most important pages in the tool where you can go and get feedback on any of the technologies that you may be looking at to add to your stack. You can come in here and take a look. You'll see reviews. You'll get feedback on stars. You can actually even reach out to those leaders who have used the technology before and ask them specific questions via the chat tool. And then finally, our agency recruiters tool. The important thing to point out here is that every single agent in this profile receives a star rating. These star ratings are from our sister site, Recruitify. And Recruitify provides feedback based on the talent acquisition leader's perspective and the candidate's perspective. So you'll see here specifically for Teddy. Teddy's got 11 ratings. He's got a 4.97 overall rating, and he's got some candidates that say fantastic things about him. So great place to come and research potential vendors for your organization. Let's get back into the slideshow and So again, today, a talk where we elevate and enable and empower our members to be better in talent acquisition, to drive the industry, and to help their organizations to achieve success. Today's meeting is about the intake call versus the strategy meeting. How do we elevate the strategic approach of TA? So our agenda for today, first thing we're going to talk about is the strategic talent advisor versus the order taker. How do we elevate with intent? I'm going to introduce Raquel Jordan. She's the one of the market talent advisors at WM. We're going to talk about what makes a rec meeting strategic. What should we be doing as TA professionals to really get a strategic focus moving forward? How do we adopt that strategic focus? And how do we get our peers and partners to likewise adopt that strategic focus with us? I think a lot of us know that we don't do this on our own. We often partner with Comp and Ben and our ER partners, our HRBP partners, our compliance partners. How do we get them to take this step with us? And then what are best practices and tips for success? As always, you're going to hear me say it over and over again. Please participate and engage. Your insights are invaluable to your partners. So with that being said, I want to thank Recruitify. Recruitify is a vendor engagement and management solution that helps you to maximize the value that you get out of agencies while eliminating the chaos that they cause in your talent organization. So our first profile is we eliminate the chaos of vendor engaged hiring. We enhance communication and relationships between you, your customers, your candidates, and your vendors. We help you to save time and money and maximize the quality that you're seeing out of your vendor engaged hiring program. And then we help you to maximize the visibility that your leaders have into the operations and successes of your vendor engaged program. If you would like to see Recruitify, if you'd like to walk through a demo, please feel free to reach out to me. The email is tim@recruitify.com. We can get some time scheduled, talk about your strategies, your challenges, and figure out how we can best help you to achieve success. With that being said, let's jump right in. All right, so really, what are we trying to figure out today? What are we talking about? The strategic meeting versus an intake meeting or an intake call. So what are we trying to accomplish in elevating that skill? Raquel, what are your thoughts being our panelist for today?
I think it kind of goes back to what you said in the beginning, Tim. You and I sort of had a conversation about this, that when you think about intake versus a strategy call, a lot of times recruiting has been seen sort of as this order taker initially. I'm going to tell you exactly what I want you to do, as opposed to saying, well, let's talk about what does this mean for you? What is your forward thinking approach? And one of the things that I make sure that I constantly do is always prepare in advance for my meetings and really think about what are the team dynamics right now? What do I know from the director that is going to happen in the future? What are some moves that might be happening? And so I think that preparation piece is pretty important. And so I'd be pretty curious to hear what other people are doing to advance those meetings in preparation. So what are some of the things that people bring to their meetings, and what information do they arm themselves with prior to those intake or strategy meetings?
So how do we prepare our recruiters to have a strategic meeting as opposed to go into the conversation and just ask a basic few questions? What do we need to arm them with to be successful?
For me, at former organizations, it's always been data. So we previously had Gartner, where we were able to go in and pull the stats on what we were looking for. So if a hiring manager is looking for an actuary and they don't want them to be remote, they want them to be in Nowhereville, Texas, or wherever.
Hey, come on.
Hey, we'd be able to come with that data and say, hey, I know this is what you want. This is how many people are in the market. This is where they're at. These are the companies. This is what's being paid. So it was much more of a consulting experience than them just saying, I want this purple squirrel. I don't know if people say that anymore, but the purple squirrels and the, that, all the wishes or backfilling for someone that's been with the organization for 30 years that picked up this unique skill set that doesn't exist in the market. So for me and my recruiting teams, it's always been instrumental for them to come with data to that meeting. So they're half listening, but half saying, I did some work. And this is what I found based on what you sent me that we were looking for.
So Brittany, you said you use Gartner. Is that correct?
Previously, I haven't had the budget in quite a few years, unfortunately, to use them. For those that use them, they are very expensive, but it was a helpful tool.
So what other tools are available out there in the market that we could potentially use to gather that data? Does anyone else use any other tool as a way to gather data in preparation for those conversations?
Yeah, my name's Jonathan. I'm out of College Station, Texas. We use a system called NeoGov. I do government style recruiting. So what I've done in the past is go back through those archives and pull that data. This is how many views your posting got. This is where we posted it. This is how long it took to get a hire, things like that. Do we want to change anything? But that's how I use it. I just use my ATS system. But yeah, I'm on the same page. I'd love to hear what other recruiters are doing out there in terms of gathering external data.
So it looks like from the chat, we've got a lot of people that are using LinkedIn Talent Insights. Is that the most common tool that we use? Is that where we're seeing the most success? I saw Talent Neuron. I'm seeing Hire EZ as well. Who's had a lot of success with LinkedIn Insights?
I'll say we didn't have success with it. We piloted it, but because our industry, I think it's industry specific. We're construction management. There's a shortage. People are exhausted about the number of agencies and the number of companies contacting them on left and right. So we've seen a huge number of people actually pull back and delete their LinkedIn profiles. Talking like thousands of people that we have not been able to find. They almost fell off the face of the earth. So, and the LinkedIn Insights, at least from our view, was only good and when you updated it. So you couldn't see if somebody didn't immediately update it. You might have somebody in our industry, PMs are probably 40 and above, 50 and above. They're not really going in there and updating it the day they start their job. It could be a long time. So we kind of haven't found anything great for us right now outside of the standard Bureau of Labor stats, because at least our industry is in there. We can get some sentiment, and then we get a little bit of other insight from a tool it's called Seek Out. But we use a lot of different things and layers to tell the story of the challenge, but we really don't have to spend a lot of time telling that because our managers know that our applicant pool is very low. We have to go and reach into companies and pull people out. We have to source these days. So,
okay. So when you have, David, when you have an organization that is that in tune with the data already, where your hiring managers are already very well versed in the specifics of their industry, how do you go about creating that trust? And I think that's part of what this is really about. Creating a talent advisor is about creating trust. It's about creating mutual respect and preventing creating a real partnership between the recruiter and the hiring manager so that the hiring manager gets what they need. So if you've got someone new, how do you get them to engage in that process? How do you teach them the things that they need to know to be successful in hiring?
So we do a lot of shadowing, chair sides, but at the end of the day, for my company, we show up physically, show up in a trailer at a job site. We're present. The business, they see us. We travel. We speak the language. We know how the job gets done, and we educate folks that have no prior experience in their industry. We make sure they get it in the sense of you need to speak the lingo, you need to understand what this is. Maybe you do some additional research. Maybe that's why we have people go onto project visits and actually physically go and talk to people. And it's not the tour where you're walking around with a project executive. You're walking around with a superintendent. You're talking to the folks in the trailer at the break room. You're talking to the subcontractors. You're getting a sense of what it is to be in that industry. And then that just goes a long way of establishing that trust, because how many people sit there, other industries, a recruiter came out to a retail store in Detroit and they understand our challenges. They understand the market. They walk the streets. They want to stop. Like, do you really do that? And for us, we do. And I think that goes a long way. And I will say the people that in my team that don't last long, and usually that's about a year or two, it's the ones that don't do that and are not willing to do it. If you're not willing to learn, you're not curious about what we do and be able to speak that language and have a real passion about building stuff, business leaders and the hiring managers aren't going to, they'll work with you, but they're not really ever going to have that relationship where you're the first call that they make. They'll go to an outside agency first.
So I think that's an excellent point, and I want to ask the team about that. Is being voraciously curious about the business a necessary component of becoming a talent advisor? And I've got a personal opinion about it. I see a lot of people shaking their heads, yes. But to David's point, do we need recruiters that are truly interested in understanding the business to convert them into talent advisors? And how do we do that? So what I guess is, what are the components? What makes up a strategic requirements meeting as opposed to just a regular old intake call? Raquel, what are your thoughts? Kick us off.
Yeah, I mean, I was just going to jump in. I think this was something you and I talked about, that, my prior CHRO said something that really arrested me when he told me early on in my career. He said that he considers himself a business person who just happens to be in HR. And I'll always remember that he said that, because it really changed the way that I view the way that I do my work, and constantly thinking about the business first. And, my paycheck obviously comes from the business, having that frame of mind just changes how you work and how you operate. And I do think it's important to have that mindset when you go in there, is really thinking about, what impact am I going to have? Am I bringing value to the team, or am I just, taking notes and then executing? So that curiosity, that, consistent learning, continuous learning I think is really important, to build that trust and relationship. And sometimes it doesn't happen overnight, right? It's not one of those things that you can go in and immediately build it. And sometimes it does take a loss. You've got to take a loss in the beginning to eventually build that relationship. But it is a timing thing, like with any relationship.
So if I can, I agree. I think that's really the point to it. It's the development of relationship. I'd like to share a personal story if I can. So when I first went to work at GameStop had a massively bloated budget for direct hire vendor engagement. And part of the reason that was the case is because the customers at GameStop did not necessarily see the talent acquisition team and function as consultative advisors. They were there solely to get a candidate, present it to the hiring leader, and take that feedback, and then George Jetson that button until somebody got hired, right? The very first conversation that I had with the VP of tax, I walked up to him in his office. I introduced myself. I said, "Hi, I'm Tim. I'm your new recruiter. I'm here to help you to fulfill this need." And the exact words, and I think this goes with what David was saying, is, "All right, I need you to call this vendor, this vendor, this vendor, this vendor, and this vendor. Tell them to send you a bunch of candidates, and then take a look at them and send me anything that you think might be a fit." Not a consultative talent acquisition piece of that conversation anywhere. So how did I respond? I said, "AJ, I appreciate that. That's not what I do. What I do is I need to understand what it is you're really trying to accomplish, so that I can go out, I can source candidates and find the right person to help you fulfill this need without spending a bunch of money on direct vendor spend." I had to negotiate with him. And to Raquel's point, I was putting myself into a position where I could take a pretty big L if I did not succeed. But I had to negotiate with him, and I said, give me 5 days. I need 5 days. In 5 days, I will present you with no fewer than 10 candidates that are an appropriate fit for your role. And I will make it hard for you to make that decision at the end of the day, because you're going to have too many good candidates to make that decision on only one. It took me 3 days. I walked back into his office. We had 10 candidates. He interviewed 6. He hired his favorite, went back and immediately had another conversation with his leadership and hired a second out of that same batch. Now, I say that because there were a couple of things that I had to do in that conversation to really turn it into a consultative approach. Number one, I had to be pretty confident in my own capabilities and the fact that I knew what I was talking about and the fact that I would be able to actually perform and achieve his goals. But I also had to know that my leader would have my back saying, I appreciate that that's what you want, but that's not what we're going to do here today. What we're going to do here is we're going to follow a process that makes sense for talent acquisition, and we're going to achieve your goal without spending any more money than we have to. So as part of that, it's elevation by intent. What are we doing as leaders to help elevate our TA team, our partners, and even our customers with the focus on strategic guidance and driving their success by providing them information, and in some cases, when necessary, pushback or just saying no?
I'll say in my experience, I have found out that when I work with team members and I just give them the answer right away, right when they need it, then it builds that dependency. But when you don't always give them the answers right away, and when you say, hey, here's this resource, use this, try to find what you're looking for, then it builds that muscle of, okay, I am capable, I've got the ability, and I'm able to go and find the resources that I need. So as a leader, that is how I personally like to approach things with my team, versus just saying, do this, or if they come with a scenario, I say, what do you think? What would you do? And then when you have meetings with the recruiter as their leader and you're in those meetings too, sometimes just saying, I trust you, you've got this, we talked about the plan beforehand, you came with your ideas, you own it, and don't invite me. I don't need to be in every meeting that you have with your hiring manager, because if I am, they look at that as I'm the decision maker, and then that automatically takes your credibility away as the expert. If I am on every email, if I am in every meeting, you don't build that relationship. So I think just giving them room to breathe and helping them find the answers, but not get to them, is how I like to set my team up for success to be strategic talent acquisition partners.
I love that, Brittany. I have always been a fan of playing dumb. So I hired a recruiter into the team at GameStop. She had never been a recruiter before. She was actually in our compliance team, but she had the personality to be highly effective, especially in light industrial, because she was very straightforward. She had a lot of very direct conversations, and she had a focus on, how do I help this customer to be successful? And my favorite approach with her was, she would come to me, I don't know how to do this. And I'd be like, well, neither do I. So you better go figure it out. I'm here to help you, but you have to find the approach that's going to be successful for you. Me telling you how I would do it is not going to get you to where you need to be. What else should we be doing to help elevate our TA partners, our TA peers, and our teams with intent? Raquel, I know that you've been in leadership roles before. How have you done it?
I usually keep them involved in any additional meetings. So, I think it's one thing to give them ownership of the meetings that they own, but it's a whole nother to invite them into broader conversations. So there's times when I've had to go into strategy meetings where I've done workforce planning with HR directors. But after that meeting, it's about sharing information and collaborating with your team and saying, hey, this is where we're thinking of going. This way everyone can come on board and join together as opposed to withholding information. So for me, I've always been one that's like about open communication and sharing as much as I can with my team, obviously to the extent that you're limited. But I think when you bring them along the journey, that helps them see the bigger picture as well. So they've got to see the vision in order to continue on moving forward, I think.
Josh Popolowski, I love it that Josh added a comment into the chat about role playing. So how often do we role play with our TA teams? How often are we having conversations? Who is that again?
Hey Tim, it's Josh.
Hey Josh, I'd love to hear about it. Tell us the story.
Yeah, so when I first started working in the industry, I had a manager who actually used to take me outside and we walk around the block. We were both smokers at the time, and he would use this as a bit of a smoker's break. And he would get me outside and take me around the block, and we would role play different scenarios with different clients and different candidates. And the ability to just kind of work out different situations in a more casual setting instead over the phone or in front of peers stuck with me over the years. And I think it's something that every person maybe shies away from a little bit when you bring up the comment of role playing. But I can guarantee you, after 2 or 3 sessions role playing with a team of 4 to 5 people, different roadblocks or different challenges with hiring managers or different markets or different candidate feedback, the team feels a lot more stronger and a lot more robust to handle those situations independently.
Agreed. I'm a huge fan of role playing. I think it's really difficult to build a skill if you've never seen someone portray that skill, right? It's walk, crawl, run. It's tell, show, do. Those are the basic and fundamental formats of training people to be effective. So how can we expect a person to be an effective TA or a true talent advisor if they're not being shown those types of conversations, and how we as leaders are approaching, potentially pushing back or providing information or really digging in with a customer to understand, is this 85-page list of every skill on the face of the planet what you really need? Or is this just a laundry list to try to get you something that's workable? What is it that you really have to have for this person to be successful in your team? What other recommendations do we have to prepare our recruiters for being successful as a true talent advisor as opposed to just a recruiter?
I think you not skipping over this, but having a robust intake session, right? So, having that intake session, setting expectations on feedback, job description, qualifications, things like that, but then sending it back to the hiring manager, right? Give it 3 or 4 days for it to marinate and like, hey, this is what I heard. What did I miss, if anything? Gives them a little bit of ownership in the process. And I think really just gets the recruiter and hiring manager on the right foot, kicking off the search.
I agree.
I agree with what Mike was saying. I think it's really important to set expectations in that meeting as well, as far as like, here's how this process is going to work. Here's what my expectations are from you as a leader, and here's what I'm going to hold you to. And if you don't do X, Y, Z, here's what I, as the recruiter, am going to do. Here's how I'm going to escalate this situation if I need to. And I think outlining that at the forefront is really important, and understanding and saying like, this is what our process is going to be, because this is what I'm going to be communicating with candidates. And we want to provide good experiences to our candidates. And if we are saying one thing to candidates, but then going and doing something completely different once the process starts, that's not a good experience. That's not the world-class, experience that we're trying to deliver. So I think outlining that at the forefront is so super important. And then when you're training new recruiters, I think it's really important to give them some autonomy to do those things, but also be willing to step in when you need to. And I think kind of letting them guide you on how you want to step, or how they want you to step in. I think sometimes we can get really protective of our teams and want to come in and be like, you know, how, you know, you need to do this, or, you know, I heard from my recruiter that you didn't do this. But I think sometimes just letting them copy you on the email, like, and kind of guiding them, here's some language that you can use, kind of like the role playing thing. Here's how you can push back and you can copy me. That kind of gives it a little bit of levity, right? It gives it, you know, or some gravity. I mean, to, like, you know, really have a punch, but without me having to do that for them, and giving them a little bit more ownership of the situation.
So I love that, Beth, and I've got a couple of things that I think I would add. Letting your team know that you have their back is one of the most important steps that you can take in elevating them into strategic talent advisors. They have to know that they're in a safe space, that they can have these conversations. And I used to tell my team, as long as you say it with professionalism and you believe that it is in the best interest of that hiring manager or this company, I will always have your back. Now, I've had a lot of conversations in closed rooms where I've had to say things like, I wouldn't have handled it this way. These are the steps that I would have taken, and you may want to consider doing this next time. But I always had their back, and they knew it. And then along with that, they didn't need me to be there to back them up, because they had created this sense of expectation with the hiring manager of, these are the exact things that are going to happen, right? To that conversation that I had with AJ in the very beginning, I said, I'm going to go source every single candidate I can find with that type of taxation experience. I'm going to send every single one of them messages and say, if you're interested in this opportunity, please reach out. I walked him through every step of what I was going to do, so there were no surprises. How many hiring managers do we have that have been talent acquisition leaders before, or even recruiters? The number's negligible. So we have to educate them on how our process works so they know what to expect. That's how you start becoming strategic as opposed to operational or reactionary. What other recommendations do we have? What other things should we be doing?
Tim, I also think on the other side of it, we have certain paths. You know, not every recruiter, not everyone in my organization will be a talent advisor.
Mhm.
And sometimes they feel they should be. You just know they're not going to get there. They don't have the skill set or whatever it is. They're not going to get there. And you have the honest conversation with them. But I have a role for them. It might be more on the coordination side, more the sourcing, something else within it. But having that conversation with them, and I have a place for you. And if they don't agree with it, then you try elsewhere. You know, the world is cyclical. Maybe you'll come back. You know, our paths will cross again. But it's a very honest conversation you have to have, especially, I don't know how everyone else is. You know, I'm overhead. I'm a cost center. I have limited resources, and I can't afford to keep trying to get somebody somewhere where they're never going to get. And I have to be honest with myself. And as a leader, I think you have to be, that helps your overall team, because they see it. They see that you're trying. They see that you're still, you know, this person's a dead weight or whatever, and they're dragging this. What they see that and they sense it. And if you never make that decision to put them, and I'm pointing towards a 9 box. You have your top right of the achievers, then you have your trusted advisors. If I can't get them into one of those 2 sections, then I may not be able to keep them, because I have to serve the business and I have to serve my team at the same time. And I think that's one thing you have to take into consideration, is some people aren't going to be talent advisors, and you have to figure out if that's okay or not. And if it's not, then you need to figure out where they go, if it's in your org or outside your organization, because you still have to serve the business.
100%. And I think having realistic expectations about the levels that our teammates can attain is important. But I also want to push back on something a little bit, David. I hate it when talent acquisition is referred to as a cost center. We have more control over the growth of an organization than any other business component in that organization, right? I tell my recruiters all the time, you control who the hiring manager sees. You control the conversation about the culture of your organization. You are often the very first person that individual will react to or interact with as they're engaging the company for the first time. So
I'm not disagreeing with that. It's the culture at my company for the businesses, right? Because my funding comes from their profits, their revenues. I hear it all the time. You pay your salary, all that other crap, you know. I get it. We've been around for a while. We'll be around for a lot longer. It will take a very long time for us to get to that point where that goes away. Can easily turn around and say, you know, I can become a profit center. I'll just start charging you for, you know, the fees that you would pay to an outside agency and see how that goes. But, you know, I get it. And no, it's constantly thrown in our faces, and, you know, it's part of the culture of certain businesses that you have, right? And you have to deal with it and you move forward. So
agree. But you know, and thank you, because this is a perfect segue into peer and partner adoption. If your compensation partner isn't working with your recruiters to provide them with information about what a reasonable market reference range is for that specific position, can they truly be a talent advisor? If that talent advisor doesn't understand how to go out and do some basic compensation analysis, can they truly be effective in being a strategic partner, right? Part of this is peer adoption. You mentioned culture. Part of it's convincing our peers that our partnership can help them to achieve their goals, right? We are central to the majority of operations in human resources. So how do we convince our peers and our partners that being a strategic talent advisor is a necessary component of the success of the business? Has anyone had that challenge previously and can share a story with us?
I'm actually going through it right now. I mean, we have a strong affiliation with one of our sites, and they're looking to, if we don't staff the new location that they're looking for, they won't open, we won't get any funding. So in recruiting for it, the market rates are higher than existing employees. So we have to look at the business side. So if we bring these new employees on, get the funding that we're looking for, we run the risk of then losing tenured employees. So it then becomes, you know, questioning, you know, does it make sense to bring them on? There's a lot of questions involved, but I think that gives a pretty clear picture of what's going on.
Yeah. So then we have to be able to have conversations with compensation and say, if we're as radically diverged from the market reference range as we appear to be, we have to come up with one of two plans. Number one, we either have to right size all of the people in that organization to appropriately align with the local market compensation structure, or we have to be comfortable, Theo, to your point, losing every last one of them and having to backfill and lose all of that competitive intelligence, all of that knowledge that already exists in the organization. What other experiences have you had trying to persuade a partner or a peer in the organization to help you to achieve talent advisor success status? Raquel,
I've run into that. Oh, sorry.
Go ahead, Kayla, please go ahead.
I have run into that over a period of like 10 years with my organization. I've popped in and out, and it really started with putting together a picture for them, because we had We had our person was at a lower level. She had no influence. And she got tired of hearing from our team that we couldn't hire anybody. And we're a nonprofit. So it's a double whammy of we don't have any money, quit asking. But being able to pull the data of let's look at turnover, let's look at how many candidates we're losing because of compensation. We're already selling all the other amazing things that we have to offer and it's not working. And then taking it a level up, and then it was another level up and getting buy-in at the executive team to say, we know that it's hard, but what's going to be harder? And we were fortunate to have somebody who was open to having a conversation. No one had approached her in that manner. Like it was literally everyone knew it was an issue, but nobody knew how to put it together and talk to it in a way that like furthered the conversation. Like, let me tell you what you need to do. It kind of is how it felt. I'm not a compensation expert, but let me give you all of the data. And then if you go talk to, our CEO at that point, I bet you could have a valuable conversation. And that had a great trickle down effect. And now we partner regularly and provide, here's our hot jobs, here's what we're seeing in the moment that's happening in the market. So it was good.
Yeah.
Change is hard, Kayla. I
It
think
is.
that was one of
Oh
the
my
things
gosh.
that like, change is always going to be difficult. And so whenever you're trying to elevate this conversation of like, okay,
Yeah.
we're no longer going to be order takers, we're going to be, strategic and try and partner with you, might not happen in the first conversation. And so I remember at one of my old firms, I had a woman who was very stuck in her ways. She was very used to getting all of the resumes, wanted to see everything, didn't want me to do any screening. And I had to give in the first time that I worked with her. She didn't have one any other way. And so the first time the conversation happened, it went that way. The second time she had an opening, we sort of worked together. I did some screenings, sent her some resumes. And it wasn't really until the third time that I worked with her now, a year in partnering with her, where she finally said, okay, I trust you. This has been going well. Let's go ahead and move forward. And so I sometimes think the piece that we're not talking about is how change can be difficult for people. And like you sometimes have to play a long game. So gaining those partners is not a quick thing. Like you've got to think long vision here.
I agree, Raquel. And I think Mary Lou Montes does as well. So Mary Lou says, I wish it were that easy. Mary Lou, where are you? Because I have a feeling that there's a story behind that wish. Have you struggled with kind of moving the needle with your peers and partners to get them to approach the problem with you as opposed to near you? Or did I call you out and you don't really want to talk? Because that's okay too.
She lost her voice, she said.
Yeah, that makes sense. Makes sense. I think there's a lot of components to this. I think it's, it really is the development of that relationship, and it has to become part of the mission of the team, the mission of the organization. So I was taught very early in my career that not only does a company need a mission, but every component of that company should also have a mission that they intend to achieve. And at every organization, one of the first things that I find is we struggle with this exact topic. So we make it our mission. Our mission at Aristocrat Gaming, the company I left to come here, was to develop relationships with our customers throughout the enterprise and to position ourselves as trusted subject matter experts and talent advisors. That was the mission of the team. The goal was simple. How do we present ourselves in a way that allows us to build trust that we know what we're talking about? And I think data came up a lot in this conversation. But how do we build that trust using information, providing people with the autonomy and the impetus to do what is right from a strategic perspective to help the organization to succeed? What are some of the best practices and tips? What have we done in the past? What what have you brought to the table in these conversations to help you to be seen as a strategic talent advisor as opposed to an operational recruiter?
This is Trisha. I can add in there. We've done a number of different things. I know a lot of people have talked about change and how that's really tough. I think that is one of probably the biggest things that we battle. We're a very data-driven organization, so we've launched a pretty robust dashboard for our teams to really help inform our recruiters to become more advisors and talking about how they've filled positions in the past. What was the timeline? What's the expectation of the hiring manager? We also went to an all hands recruiting approach, and we very much believe that everyone is a recruiter. And we started with the CEO and named him Chief Recruiting Officer and worked on his LinkedIn profile. So we spend a little time in the intake meetings actually going over LinkedIn profiles of our hiring managers, because we know that candidates will reach out to them. They're an extension of us. Yes, we own the process, we own the sourcing, but they are also representatives of the company and really that first interaction with candidates. And that's so crucial. And there's data to show that if a hiring manager has an interaction with a candidate in the hiring process before they've applied, that their likelihood is 8 times higher to accept an offer. So we know that that's really critical on how they are represented in the marketplace. So we really advise them and show them that data and how a robust LinkedIn profile could, be beneficial for us. We'll actually do the recruiting emails for them and send it out or show them how to draft it. We have a Textio tool that actually helps augment the language that they send. And it links right into LinkedIn. So we walk them through that and we really educate them and we set high expectations. The next iteration of our dashboard will actually show, we believe, I don't have the full data. I've got a lot of commentary on the time it takes us to schedule interviews and the time it takes us from the interview to make a decision. Well, we know that those are critical fall-off points for candidates, but I don't have the full data. So that's the next iteration of that dashboard is what is that time frame and how do we improve it? So what I've charged my recruiters with is in that intake meeting, if it took 70 days to fill the position last time, and here's where we had trouble, based on what you can see in the dashboard now, what's our timeline realistically? How are we going to try and beat that time in the past? And then talk about the cost of keeping a vacancy. What is that doing to your other internal folks that are picking up that work? What is the plan, right? We often don't talk about, the cost of keeping something vacant. And I don't mean that we settle. We certainly made expectations of what they're looking for in the job, but that we also have, and where we've had to challenge some folks on minimum requirements, right? Their expectation of, hey, I have to have this. Do you really have to have that? Or is that a preferred? And if you have 95%, does that outweigh the cost of keeping this vacant for 3 more months? What is that doing to the rest of your team that's picking up that position and that work that's been vacant for 3 months now? So some of those discussions.
And thank you, Trisha. I appreciate that. I think that the way you started out was perfect. Every person in an organization is a recruiter in some way, shape, or form, right? Every single one of them. And if we're not helping them to achieve success by providing them with all of the tools that we already have in small buckets, right? You don't want to teach your chief recruiting officer how to sit and source all day.
Exactly.
But if we don't give them the tools to be successful, and even watch them engage in their success, they're probably not going to be. I can't tell you how many hiring managers in my career, to the point you were making at the end, tell me, well, I need someone that can do this, and this. And well, Mr. Manager, Ms. Manager, non-binary manager, that's not in your job description. You tell me you want somebody that's got 5 to 7 years of experience, but your job description says you need someone with 0 to 3, right? Number one, you're kind of violating some basic tenets of equity and inclusion, but you're also hobbling yourself because you're not actually attracting the talent that you expect and need. You're attracting talent that you believe is going to be the only thing that's going to make it across the line, right? So pushing back and having conversations about what is expected and why it's expected. As everybody I'm sure on these calls knows, I've got a story for everything.
Can I ask a question, Tim,
Sure,
about that?
please.
I do have some. How do you, I think sometimes when recruiters that are newer to recruiting, they get intimidated by titles. So their hiring manager may be the chief recruiting officer or, anyone else in the organization. And they're used to those people being the knowledgeable sources for the business. And sometimes they may have the skills to, show that person, how recruiting is done, but they get intimidated by the title. So I would love to hear tips from leaders or peers on the team and how they get their team members or their team members comfortable with dealing with people at a different level, at a higher, maybe a much higher level than they may be.
I'm going to throw this one to Raquel because I think it's a great question for her. Raquel, how have you helped new recruiters kind of get past that fear that their hiring manager, their director, their VP, whoever is going to bite if they don't do exactly what they're told?
Yeah, shadowing. It's really the only way is shadowing, helping them, having those first conversations with you in person. So we do, you, how does it go? I forgot how it goes. We do, you do. And there's a third one I'm missing, but having them shadow initially, and then not only shadowing, but also giving them confidence. Because a lot of times when you're making that transition, especially from entry-level recruiter to then trying to elevate the conversation, you just need someone to believe in you, and you need someone to say, you've got this, like, keep going, you're doing a great job. It's really building that confidence in your team members, but then also having them shadow you. That's how I've done it in the past, at least.
So I just saw an amazing comment and it ran away. Bianca Murkowski, understand your audience. What is the communication style? Get to know them on a personal level, not just professional. Develop a mutual level of respect. I think it's more about the questions that you ask and and the more people open up, you get to the root of who they are and what they're looking for. So I think that's an excellent point. And Bianca, I'd love for you to add more if you could. Leslie, please go ahead.
We had a saying in my house growing up, they put their pants on one leg at a time. And I think that's an important leveler for people to realize, and also professionally, the knowledge that the chief revenue officer probably knows a lot more than you do about balancing the books. But you as a talent acquisition professional know an awful lot more about hiring. So it is easy to be intimidated, particularly when you're young, particularly when you are new to a role. But the reality is you were hired into the role or trained into the role because of a skill set that you have. And the skill set that you have makes you an expert, where the C-suite person that you're talking to doesn't have that expertise. And yes, they can do things that you cannot, but you can do things that they cannot. And being armed with that knowledge going into a conversation helps to level the playing field.
1,000%.
And this is Trisha. If I could just add in there too, I think what Leslie and Raquel said is just spot on, right? It is around shadowing and being there, and then really kind of reinforcing to our own teams that you are the expert in this space. You may not feel like it, but you really are. And we've doubled down on training right now. We have Focus Fridays. I have a no meeting Friday rule that I then allow my team to focus on their own development. I send out a 3-page list of all the different training things, including free training for veterans. You can get a veteran certification on LinkedIn for free. You don't even have to have a LinkedIn account, right? There's all these things that our own teams can do to educate themselves and become even greater experts in our own field. But also really, we have a class called Influencing Without Authority, and just walking our teams through that. We are the experts in recruiting. We have a very tenured organization. We've got folks with 30, 40 years in a specific role. You'll never gain that knowledge, nor do I really want you to be an expert in the poles and wires. We're a utility company. Your expertise is in recruiting. And so that's sharpen that tool. Let's get you comfortable with that. And then you show up in a way that really, that your expertise and let them know theirs. But how do you complement that? And how do you learn from them? Not that you're going to go do their job, but how do you know enough to be educated and speaking about the jobs that you're recruiting for?
Trisha, I agree. I feel like when you and that's what I kind of was leaning towards with my post, being an expert, like when you invest your time into really understanding the business and asking as many as questions to truly understand, to have that business acumen, I feel like that's where you're going to build that trust with these partners. They're going to open up a little bit more. They're going to put their guard down a little bit more and know that you are the expert. You have their best interest in mind. You want to bring the best talent in. So I think, like, again, understanding the business first and foremost, and then you can negotiate on those different terms. Like, hey, do you really need 5 to 7 years, or can we bring somebody in that has 3 years and maybe 2 years management or so forth? So I think that's where the level of trust comes in, is, showing that you're invested, you want to understand, you want to bring in the best.
I agree, Bianca, and I think it's important to understand, and I'm about to show my age. Asking questions is paramount to the successful development of a relationship. So how many people have read the book, How to Win Friends and Influence People? Right? If you haven't, if your teams haven't, it's old school, but it is still super relevant. It is, how do I have a conversation with someone and understand what it is that they're really trying to accomplish, or who they are, in a way that's going to allow them to be successful, right? The other book that I'm super fond of, and I used to give all of my recruiters one of these, it's Raving Fans by Ken Blanchard. So Raving Fans is an amazing book, and it's all about the customer service approach, because no matter what role you're in, you're serving a customer. Even that chief executive officer has people that he reports to, or she reports to, or they report to, that are ultimately their customers, even if they're stockholders. What other things have you tried, or what other ways have you tried to approach this challenge to help your teams be successful? Are there any other curiosities or questions, or even sources that you've used?
One thing we
put in
haven't talked
comments a
about.
couple of times. I think a lot of times, like, it's never going to happen overnight, right? The trust building and everything. Like, you can set up the intake meeting. At the end of the day, they want results. So, I always try to find those heroes, or like opportunities of those people that are going to support you, right? Because, you might have your first intake meeting. They want, this crazy job. Find it, right? Like, find the person, give them the results, and then that starts to build the trust. Because at the end of the day, data, there's conversations you can have. They just want you to hire really great people. Like, I get excited when they get excited about the people that I put in front of them, because that is what's going to continue to build the trust. So the initial conversation important, but the relationship past that, and building that trust, and building, and like just showing the results. Like, I had a manager there, they tell me, goes, Ryan, you started here and you hired someone that's going to change our business. Like, that is exciting to me, right? So at the end of the day, and it's probably how I was growing up, like, you earn your trust, you earn your respect. At the end of the day, like, talk is great, but go find the people. Don't say no. Like, try the challenge, embrace the challenge, and embrace your team to, like, essentially love the challenge of finding people. Because I work in an advertising industry, and you think we get applicants all day. We don't. We find most of our people for sourcing. So yeah, I think our 90% of our applicants are sourced, and I love the hunt. Like, at the end of the day, and I'm an internal recruiter, right? So my team really does earn their trust by finding just great people. And I think that's the biggest thing you can do. And that builds confidence in the recruiter. It builds confidence in the hiring teams, and all the other stuff will happen if you can just build and execute the results. So
I love it, Ryan. I agree 100%. I think the easiest way to build trust is to tell them what you're going to do, and then actually go do it. Actually achieve the result for them. Actually accomplish what you said you were going to accomplish. We are coming up on time. We're at time, actually. This is not a sales pitch for anyone else's organization, but if you're interested in learning more about how to elevate your teams. I've worked with a couple of very successful programs, and I would be happy to share that partner information with you. There's a tool called, or an organization called Recruiting Toolbox that I have used that has done a fantastic job at creating small, very focused training scenarios. Role playing, we talked about how to have the conversation, preparing for the conversation, all of those types of things. If you're interested, reach out to me. I'll give you the contact information for the person that I have used in the past. Again, my email is tim@talktalent.com. But I want to leave everyone on kind of a final note and message, and it really kind of resonates with what Ryan was saying. It's not one conversation. It's not one meeting. It's not, I'm going to come and I'm going to have this talk with you and I'm going to go away and be everything that you ever wanted me to be from a talent acquisition perspective. It is truly a partnership, and it takes time to develop, and it takes time to build. And you have to give your teams the opportunity to achieve success while simultaneously letting them feel safe that if they make a misstep, or if they do something that may not necessarily align, that you're going to help them overcome that misstep and get back to building that relationship and trust with their customer. Thank you, everybody, so much. I love these conversations. Again, every week I learn something new. If there is anything that you need from Talk Talent, or the board, please feel free to reach out to me directly. Thank you so much for joining in this conversation. We had a great conversation on the chat as well. Reach out, stay connected, and everybody, let's talk, okay? Y'all have a great day, and we'll talk again soon. Bye-bye.